Is this thing on? Am I getting, hello? Okay, all right, looks like we're good. Hey everyone, welcome back to Web Design DeCal. It's week 5 now. I hope everyone's doing pretty well. I think right now we're about in midterm season, so like almost every moment feels like a good nap time. Who's got midterms this week? Oh my gosh, all right. Yeah, it's practically everyone. Yeah, that's pretty chill. You know what else is pretty chill? Our very own Tomas Vega won CalHacks this weekend. Please give him applause. I believe Tomas built with his team, they built a drone, or they didn't build a drone, but they built an interface so that you could control it with your mind. Cause Tomas is like really big on brain computing interfaces, so if any of you are interested in controlling or interfacing with computers via your brain, then go talk to Tomas, because like he's the guy on campus to talk to. He knows everything about that. So yeah, I mean, congrats to him again. That's awesome. Let's see here. I heard an interesting comment from Phil the other day. He said that he heard this like really kind of funny thing that some students were confused that during the hands-on you're supposed to follow along with what we do, you know, because I'd hoped that like the name was sort of indicative that hands-on means like put your hands on the computer and like follow along as we do it. And I know sometimes we might go a little fast, but otherwise like just so from now on, you know, like during hands-on it's actually good to like download the files from WD resources, WD portal resources, and go ahead and follow along too. I mean, like I think we could change it to WD do it, or just like something that's more obviously like do this with us, because it'll really help you out too. That makes this whole lecture a lot more than just listening to us talk up here. So that's one thing. I'd also like to take this opportunity to talk about the projects. So I hope who's started on the projects with their groups, or at least met with their groups. All right, yeah, that's pretty solid. So in case you don't know, like the way that it's all set up is that we have teams based on subsets, groups of 2 of the WD instructor teams. So like my group member is Ingrid, and I forgot the other groups, but yeah, but basically we're sort of competing with one another, and we want to have like the group that's in our group like to win it all, or like to have like, you know, the best midterm project. So basically this Sunday, instead of office hours, at Free Speech Movement Cafe from 2 to 5 p.m. We will have project check-ins. So what that means is that you and your group for about 15 minutes or so will come and find your corresponding WD team pair, and then you'll just basically check in and we'll give you feedback at that time. So you might ask like, well, when do I know when to go? We'll be actually sending out one of those we join ins, one of those like who can make at what time, and then you can sign up for your 15-minute or so slot, and then yeah, you'll get feedback on how well you guys are doing. So hopefully, you know, you don't come there and you're like, well, we haven't actually started yet, so it's 15 minutes. Like I don't know, it's just best to start between now and Sunday. So if you could find a time to meet up despite midterms and such, that'd be awesome. That'd be really great. Does anyone have any questions about the IMDb project? I hope things are pretty clear. We do have like about on the spec, more or less everything you need to know. So I think that's all I want to talk about before diving into CSS positioning and floats. So this is actually the second to last lecture involving CSS and HTML. Next week will be our last one. And next week we'll basically wrap things up, review a little bit, and also talk about basically like cutting edge stuff in HTML and CSS. Because for the most part, I've talked about things that have applied in HTML and CSS for a long time now. And this is the last of those things. But we're going to learn how to basically position things such that you know they kind of behave like how you want them to behave, and not so much like the slide here that I have, where like you have or you expect a certain behavior, like you want the text to be like, I don't know, in this, and then it just doesn't go the way you want it to, right? This is like classic CSS being witchcraft, like totally unpredictable. But like really, I think that a lot of that stems from not really understanding how CSS positioning works. So we're basically going to go over, we're going to try to structure our web pages better. But in particular, we're going to talk about two CSS properties. And those two are really important because they're really crucial as to like positioning elements that positioning the relationship between elements on top of each other. And so those two attributes, or those two properties, are position and float. So up to this point, we talked about box model and basically basically margins and paddings and like how things are like if they were side by side, for instance, for the most part. But now we're going to really talk about like how do they sort of stack in front and behind one another. So the first property I want to talk about is just the position property, and in particular position static. So position static is basically how things lay out on the page by default. It is the default. You probably actually never use the actual position static in your CSS unless you were trying to override something, right? Like imagine if it were like a different property in general, but for this particular case you wanted it to be static or back to the default, then that's pretty much the only time you use position static. But just know that it looks like this. So if I had this page here and I had like lines of text and then I had an image and it was just statically positioned, the text would not react accordingly out of the box. It just sort of does this massive line break, and then the rest of the text follows after it. And for the most part, this is not really what you want, right? Because it just wastes a lot of page space. And surely CSS must be more customizable than this, and you'd be right. It certainly is. Another thing to note is that in addition to margin top, padding top, and all these other sort of positioning, there's actually literally just top, bottom, left, and right. And these are what I'd call the offset properties, and you can't use them when you're in position static. We'll talk about when you can use them, but basically, yeah, this is actually a part where a lot of people get confused, but you can use these other properties called top, bottom, left, and right only if you're positioned in a different way. Like relative, for instance. So say instead of position static, you have position relative. In this universe, you can use offset properties. And so position relative, what does it mean? Well, position relative really sort of means relative to itself. So once you put position relative, just by itself, like just for this image, you have position relative, then you can actually set these offset properties, right? And the example shows exactly what happens when you do have these properties. This example is like, what I've tried to do here is I've tried to have a little yellow square. I'm not sure if it's super visible, but there's like this yellow square in the corner, and that's supposed to be where the image would normally be, right? Pretty much exactly where the image was back here. It's supposed to be, starting from that corner, but it isn't because I've changed it a little bit. I set the top to -10 pixels, so it goes -10 up from where it should be, and left -10 pixels, so -10 to the left of where it should be. And as a result, it's pushed and skewed off a little bit. And so basically what position relative is relative to itself, aka relative to where it would normally be, how much do I want to offset it by? And so relative to where it normally be, if I said -10 pixels for the top, -10 for the left, then it would react in this way. Something to note actually, and I don't know if anyone picked up on this, but when you do this sort of thing, you can obscure other things, right? Did anyone pick up on how, in this case, for example, like if I have this image and I have text above it, and then I move the image, up and to the left, there's the possibility that I'd cover up things below it, beneath it. You know what I'm saying? And by beneath, I don't mean like below it, but I mean like behind it. Like if we're thinking about it in layers, then like the layer behind has the possibility of being obscured, and it actually would be in this case. So like if you had this like square image, and then yeah, you would actually cover up some text. So this is the first time the first time when you step out of position static land and you go into position relative and the other positions we're talking about, you have for the first time something called z-index. So and it's sort of self-explanatory. You have like your x and y, but now for the first time we've got like z-index, aka like in what order is this sort of layered? Is probably the best way that I explained it. So let me see here. So just an example, like this image, like this one has a sort of, let's say it has a z-index of 1, it would look like this. It would cover up the text behind it, right? But if I if I just set the z-index to -1, then it would actually go behind the text. And you can basically consider that the default z-index is 0, which makes sense, right? You just sort of start it at the 0 z-index. And then when you have things that are not statically positioned, like this relatively positioned image, then you run into the case where you can start worrying about z-index. So yeah, actually that brings up a lot of concerns now. Like when you start to use position relative, it's worth noting that you have the possibility now of obscuring static elements, and that you can't really correct for that by adjusting the z-index on static elements because they're static. But you can try to correct for it by adjusting the z-index of the relatively positioned element, like we're doing here, right? So suppose we actually didn't want the image to cover the text. We set a z-index to a negative value or something less than 0, which is the default. Does everyone follow me on that? Does that make sense? Question?
Text have to be relative as well?
So the question is, doesn't the text have to be relative as well as the image? The answer is no. You can imagine that like the text is its own div, and you don't set any position properties, so it's just static. And then behind this static block of text is a relatively positioned image with a negative z-index. So the image goes in front. So yeah, it's possible. And we'll go through some. Actually, today is going to be pretty demo filled, so you'll get to see a lot of stuff because I have a lot of JS fiddles lined up. So yeah, is that all clear? OK, yeah. So what do I mean by relative to yourself? I mean that basically when you're using position relative, you can basically frame it as a question of where would this normally be? And so like I said, like the yellow square is like where the corner would normally be. But because I've offset it some amount, it's relative to where it would normally be.
So would normally be if it were static?
Yeah. Yeah, I guess, yeah, you could think of it that way. Relative to where it would be if it were static. Correct. Question in the back.
Could we say that it's relative to the parent element if it's a nested element?
Ah, great question. So the question was, like, can we say that is it relative to its parent element if it's a nested element? The answer is actually no for the element itself. If the element that we're talking about here is the actual element that has position relative, then actually no. It actually is literally relative to itself as to where it would be statically. But we will talk about, actually right coming up, that there is a way in which you have to do it relative to the first non-static parent. And that's actually the very next slide, I believe. So if there's no more confusion about position relative, then there certainly will be when you try to work with it, because it just might not make so much sense until you actually do it. So, but I hope the explanation was clear enough as it is. So, oh, OK, cool. All right, so we're going to do this demo real quick. This is tough to see, but essentially the URL is tinyurl.com/wdpuppies. So I'm just going to go to that demo real quick. Oh boy, OK. I think I went a little heavy on the bacon ipsum, so it's tough to see. OK. All right. So I have basically the demo that I showed earlier, more or less. I have text, and I have an image, and I have more text. And so the behavior, as you can see, like when I try to stretch this out a little bit, like if the viewport / window were bigger, then like here's a bunch of white space that just is. It's just there. And so one thing that you'll notice actually about this image is that the properties that I've given to it, obviously I've given it width, so it stays at that width. But I've also given it a top of -50 pixels. But first question, did this apply? Did the -50 pixels apply to this image? No, it didn't. No. Does anyone remember why? That's right. Yeah. By default, everything's static, so it's static, and therefore this offset in addition to bottom, left, and right, would not work. So suppose, since we just talked about relative, I just change this to relative. Ah, there we go. So from where it normally was, we have moved it up 50 pixels up from where it should be. And like I said, it does indeed cover the text, which is actually, for the most part, not necessarily what you want. And so this is the first time where we can actually go into the z-index. And since all z-indexes are 0 by default, and I want to move it behind, I would do it to some negative value. It could be like, basically any negative value, but just to not be overkill and to make a lot of clear, just make the most sense, just -1 will do. And so now the text is above, and you can see the puppy image behind. Is that a question over there?
So like when you first made it relative, it's not like a positive z-index. It's in front of the text. It's still 0 z-index.
Oh, good question. So the question was, before I messed with the z-index, it looked like, yeah, you're right. So it looks like that the z-index would not be the same, or, I mean, basically the image covers the text. So why do you have to modify the z-index if everything's standard 0? I don't think this is 0 at the moment, for the reason that it covers things up. I think it's probably like 1 or so right now. You can think of it as though it's 1. Yeah. So just something to note. Question over there?
So if you were to not have -1, if you had -2 or 3, would that mean you had more layers to go behind? So you could go behind 2 layers and have a third one.
So the question was, if instead of z-index -1, I used like -2 or 3, would there be more layers? The answer is, I guess, yes in a way. In this case, there are only 2 layers. So it really just compares, like, is -2 less than 0? Yeah. So put it behind. But yeah, you're right. That does mean that if I had like a really complexly laid out page, you could have like a ton of layers. Not that necessarily that's a good thing or good practice, but yeah, possible. Question?
The practice of automatically assigning the z-index based on like the position of the tag in HTML.
So the question was, is z-index assigned by the position of the tag in HTML? Sorry?
Is that where it's by default?
Is it z-index 0 by default?
No, I mean, like, you know how the puppies were in front by default?
Yes.
So I'm curious, if you had other images, would they be loaded in based on where they were in the HTML file? Would they be assigned particular z-indexes based on where?
Oh, OK. So well, the answer is no. Well, in general, like no, nothing would be assigned z-indexes based on where they are listed in the HTML. Z-index is really like what you assign because it's like what's in front and what's behind. I hope that answered your question. Sean, do you have something to say about that?
Just to clarify, so by default, everything is z-index 0. But if you have 2 pieces after element, whatever comes after, it has a higher, goes on top of whatever on the top. If the z-index is the same.
So I guess the right answer to the question is like if it's same as z-index, then the way they break ties is whatever later in the code. All right, I think I have to move on for now. But if you have any remaining questions, we can take them offline. All right, so now we're going to talk about a totally different thing: position absolute. This is where the element is moved. It's sort of like taken out of the page. It's like ripped out of the page, and then only relative to the first non-static element. First non-static parent, rather. So basically, if there's nothing, then it's just the page itself. But otherwise, like it could be some position relative element too. So in this case, there is no parent element in this example, so it's just doing it based on the page. And based on the page, 10 from the top, or 5 from the top, and 10 from the left is going to be basically there. OK. So now consider and just pretend that the larger outer rectangle is not actually the browser, but it's actually some position relative div, and it's surrounding the position absolute div. because it's surrounding, it's considered a parent, right? And so because that parent is position relative, it's non-static. And because it's non-static, the position absolute element will position itself relative to it. So this might be hard to wrap your head around at first, but basically it's like you've almost recreated like the page in a sense within that larger outer parent div. Now instead of doing everything relative to the page, you're doing it relative to a div in the page. And then you can almost see this like being like a sort of divception, right? Where it's just like you could do this for a lot of just recursive things. I'll show you later. There's a whole demo about this, but yeah, basically you remove it from the document entirely, and as a result, it's no longer affected by the properties of divs around it. Unless, of course, it's the parent relative parent div or something like that. It's really just like sort of ripped out of the page. It's useful. It's definitely very useful, but it's also not particularly mobile friendly because when you do things absolutely, then unless you're really clever with like how you position things, like say with percentages as opposed to hard pixels, it just won't respond very well. It's not very responsive and not very good responsive design, which is something that we'll actually be talking about a lot. But so suppose like this is my code. I'll let you look over it real quick. But basically, I have this parent called container, and I have content. So it would just position itself relative to container. In this case, I have no container around it. There's no parent div, so it would just do it based on relative to the page. OK, so now I'm going to quickly do this demo. So the URL for this demo, by the way, is tinyurl.com/divception. OK, all right. So the code here is pretty simple. I have like 3 squares, one white, one gray, one black, each bigger than the rest. The outer one, the black one, is the parent element. And so yeah, this doesn't scale well. But yeah, basically this is all the HTML I have. It's just like an outer div, an inner div, a content div, and an inner div. And they're all sort of enveloping the next one. So the parent here is relative, as we can see. The content one, or the gray one in the middle, is absolutely positioned. And the white one, the small one here, is also absolutely positioned. So because, like I said, absolutely positioned elements look to the first non-static parent, aka this big black square, then all these values that I have here for top and left will be relative to just that, relative to the parent. So the parent of this middle square is the black square, right? The parent of the gray square is the black square. So if I said 50 pixels from the top of the black square and 50 pixels from the left, it basically centers it. That's just the way I drew this out dimensions-wise. But it basically centers it because now it's officially 50 pixels from the top, 50 pixels from the left. The inner one is also absolutely positioned. And so it'll look for the first non-static parent. In this case, it's actually not the black one, actually. I think I misspoke earlier. It's actually the gray one, because the gray one is non-static. It's position absolute. Therefore, this will position itself relative to the gray one. And so if I say 50 pixels from here, it won't do 50 pixels from here. It'll actually do it relative to the gray one. And so when I run this, they're all centered. Does that make sense? Is that relatively clear? I hope this makes a lot of sense, or like, because a lot of bugs, at least on the front end, if something doesn't show up where you want it to, it's often because of stuff related to this. Tomas.
What happens if you put the white square fixed?
Oh, OK. All right. Yeah, I guess we'll talk about fixed positioning real quick. But yeah, I can do that real quick. So Tomas just asked, what if we took the inner square and we made it, and we made it position fixed. So we're going to talk about fixed positioning. But basically, what fixed positioning does is that instead of looking for the parent like what it did when it was absolute. It will look for the page, and then relative to the page, in this case, 50 pixels from the top of the page and 50 pixels from the left, it'll stay there. So that's what fixed elements do, and we'll talk about that right now. Okay, so here we've got position. So in position fixed, basically, like, it's rarely used, but like if you ever wanted to have something stick to the page no matter what happens, so like as you scroll, it's literally like in the same place, say like a navigation bar, for example, then that's what you would use to fix it there on the page. Like, so no matter where you scroll or whatever, it'll just stay there. The same goes for vertical navigation bars, I guess. But if anything, this is really simple to understand. It just stays there no matter how much you scroll or where you're on the page. Yeah, it's relative to the whole viewport, not of any, like, yeah, not attached to any divs around it. So those were the 4 values of position. We had static, relative, absolute, and fixed. It can be, I don't know, really interesting. Does anyone have any final questions about any of these positionings? Okay. All right. So now we'll talk about floats. So floats are yet another way of positioning things in a way that you want them, I don't know, to like fit in the flow of the page, right? So, for example, like doing something like this, something where you have, images and text, and you just want the text to just flow like this, as opposed to being obscured by the image. Say you don't want, the image to, like go over the text nor go under. You just want it just to be like this, right? Like, why isn't this just like a trivial thing to do, right? So you have, yeah, here's one div. But yeah, you get, like, based on everything I've told you so far about positioning, you can only get something like this at best, right? Where like there's an image behind there, and like, no, I don't want that. I want it to just sense that there's stuff there. Like, please. So, if you tried, maybe you could do a display inline block, which is what we talked about yesterday, a clever way of horizontally aligning elements on the page. But even then, it would not be the most clear and clean solution, right? I mean, you'd have a bunch of divs like this, where you have, one there, and each one of those would have to be separate. So like 3 separate blocks to do this, and it's just gross, right? It's just not clean, and like, what would you even call those IDs and stuff like that? So thankfully, there's a much better way, and that is something called float. So you can only either float left or float right, which is great. It takes precedence, and it stacks things horizontally, kind of like inline block, but it makes other elements more aware of its presence, right? So another property, I guess, of floats is that text wraps around them, like I showed earlier. And so just to go over like how it differs from others, here's standard divs. As standard divs, as you know, because they're block elements, they stack vertically like this. But then you got floats. If you add a float, and all of a sudden everything just sort of reacts to it, just sort of wraps around it too. And so this tiny URL is CalHacks, because we were at CalHacks and we did a little demo, but I figured it still works in terms of a demo. Yeah, so basically this is just a sort of representation of what's already happened. Because this thing is floated left, the text reacts nicely, and suppose it weren't, then it wouldn't. Okay. All right. Okay, so when would you use float, you might ask? So suppose, like, this is just like as concrete of a use case as I can think of, but like, suppose you have like all these buttons and you're trying to make like a horizontal menu, right? And if you want to like stack them all horizontally, you could use display inline block, but you'll find actually that there's this strange behavior where there's actually like little gaps that appear between each of them, and you can't actually get them to go away, or at least not in a very smooth way. But you can if you stack them using float. So if you just float left all of these elements, then they won't leave any gaps, and they'll appear something like this. So the URL for this one is calhacks2, so tinyurl.com/calhacks2. OK, so this looks a little strange right now because they're all OK. So I know that this will be hard to see inside, but basically, if you have it in front of you, you can see that here they all are, and despite being display inline block, they are just not behaving well because they have this strange gap that I didn't put there. So if I float them all left, so every one of these menu items will be floated left, then they'll all like sort of push to the left, and then get rid of all the gaps, and voila, you have your navigation bar that's nice. One last sort of thing about floats, one last sort of nuance is that after you're done floating, you have to attach a div that's called clear, and you need to use something called clear both. And I guess, yeah, to best demonstrate this, I think I'll just go back in here, and I'll suppose I had another div in here, and it's like text, text, text. OK, so like, suppose this is not the behavior you wanted because you wanted the text to come in on the next line, right? You wanted a sort of line break to say like, all right, I'm done stacking things to the left. But you'll find that like, even though you didn't apply float left to this div, and this div is not a menu item, it's still like sort of attaching onto the left. So what you really have to do is you have to sort of, I think what's best practice is really, and I'll zoom in on this, is that you have to do a sort of div clear. And I like to make this a class because we're going to use this like pretty frequently. But if you clear this element, then the only thing this class needs to have is something called clear both. And so now you get this line break. You can almost, you can think of it pretty much as a line break. So now, all the elements thereafter, despite not being floated left, will finally line break and behave like how you want them to. So this block's float left, but if I do a clear, it's like pressing enter in a way, just everything moves to the bottom. And yeah. Any last questions? Question?
Does float, does the div box wrap around the float, or is it just the text within the div box?
So the question was, does the div box wrap around the float, or is it just the text?
If you had background black for the text div box, would the whole thing be black, or would it be like the side with the text? Would the text be black?
Let's see. I think I'm having trouble understanding your question, but I think I have to shoot off real soon. So we can take this offline, or you can test it in JS Fiddle, if that is a satisfactory answer.
Okay.
But yeah, last question.
Do you think we need to like every time we make a float, should we put a clear thing in it, or?
Oh, so the question was, every time we make a float, should we put a clear thing in it? Basically, you put a clear thing after you're done using float, right? So in the case of the menu, like, I have all the menu items, and now I want to move on to the next thing on my page, but I can't because it's still stacking to the left. So then when you want to press enter, basically, like just next line break, then you put in this class clear, and then voila, everything moves down. Question?
Yeah, is like doing the clear both same thing as making the class like clear fix? That's what it's called, right?
Yeah, yeah. So essentially, it's clear fix, and yeah, same behavior. Question?
Back to the demo, how come clear right and clear none produce the same output?
How come clear right and clear none produce the same output? Oh, yeah. So, well, clear right is basically, clear both means like both left and right. So it's just a sort of general, like, quick way to like just do clear fix. Just like be done with the floats and move on to the next thing. So yeah, it should have similar behavior in that case, but just as a sort of like save you guys some trouble, I just say like do clear both. All right, so we're almost done, guys. Like the very next lecture will be the last one about HTML and CSS. So I know you guys are ready to move on to JavaScript and stuff. I know I am. So yeah, basically we'll just talk about like really cool things you can do in HTML5 and CSS3, the latest versions of those, because so far everything has been sort of true since like 2006. But at least everything I've told you all so far. So yeah, that's all for me. We're going to do a hands-on. Hi, everyone.
Oh, did you turn it on?
Yeah. Maybe he won't.
Hi everyone. So for today's hands-on, we're going to discuss some CSS positioning. We encourage you guys to follow along with us. You can download this hands-on on our website in the resources tab, right where the lecture is. So for today's hands-on, we're going to make a scroll website with a fixed top bar. So first, let's inspect what we have so far. So we have a background, and then under it we have a nav bar that we're going to position on top of our background, and we have a title as well. So the first thing we're going to do is that we're going to position our top bar on top of our background. So what positioning should we use for our top bar? Yes?
Fix?
Yep. So we're using position fix because we want our top bar to stick to the top whenever the user scrolls. And since we want our top bar to be at the top, we're going to set the top equal to 0. So notice how the buttons on the left, wait, they're not seeing the button.
Oh.
Just like move it to the left. Yeah, so notice how the buttons are stacked vertically right now, and we want them to be stacked horizontally on our top bar. So Andy covered 2 ways of horizontally stacking. The first way is using inline block elements. So by making them inline block, we're removing the padding and margins around them. So now they stack horizontally. We could also use floats.
So just to add on, it's only the horizontal margins and paddings. You see like the top padding or margin is still there.
Yeah. And so the next way is using a float. So float right. So notice how this inverted our HTML structure. At first we had contact at the beginning, now there's home. Alright, now let's add some spacing between our buttons. So let's say margin right of 50 pixels. Alright, any questions so far?
How do you bring it forward again?
What do you mean?
The top bar?
We use the position fixed on it.
Okay.
Yeah. So next we want to position our title on top of the background. So what positioning could we use for that? Yes? Thomas? Great, yeah, absolute. So yeah, by making the title position absolute, it's going to be on top of our background. But we have to give it an offset. And we want our title to be in the middle of the page. So we're going to set our top to be 50%. Well, we're going to use this calc function we covered last week. So we're going to calc 50% minus half of the height of our title. So in this case, we can say the title is 168 pixels. So we do 168 pixels divided by 2. And this centers our title. So the next thing, we want to horizontally center the title. So we can use the text align property. So does anyone know why the title is still not centered, even though we use text align? Yes?
I actually was dealing with this bug while doing that. Not a bug, was I dealt with this problem on homework calls when I set a width attribute, it disables the center.
Yeah, exactly. So we want to set a width so that the text is in the middle of the div. So yeah, width 100%. So yeah, this centers our title. Yes, Thomas?
But also lower width and use a margin 0 also.
Yeah, we could also use, yeah. All right, next we want to use some text shadow to give some contrast with the background. So for the title, we're going to use a text shadow 4 pixels black. And for the subtitle, 2 pixels black. I notice now when we scroll, our text goes over the top bar. But we want our text to go under the top bar, not hide what's on the top bar. So what could we do to fix that? Yes? Yeah, exactly, z-index. So let's give the top bar a z-index of 999 to make sure it's always on the top of our website. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Any questions? Yes?
What are the common practices for z-index? Like 999, I feel like it's kind of arbitrary.
I
Yeah.
think it only goes to like 999. I'm not sure, but that's like the maximum value.
So like when you're developing a website, like what's the best practice for keeping your z-index traffic?
I mean, if you know something is going to be at the very top, I would recommend just doing 999. But I mean, it's up to you. You're the designer, so.
You can also have negative values, so
Yeah.
if you ever need that, just keep in mind. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Can you explain like the text align center and then like the width 100%?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Okay.
So for the text align, if we don't have a width 100%, right now what the text align is doing is it's centering the text in the middle of this this blue space. Let's go over over this blue space.
Oh, within the blue space?
Yeah, within the blue space. But we want the blue space to be the whole width, so it's in the middle.
Oh, so you're just shifting over the whole div.
We're just making the div the whole width.
Oh, right, and then centering it within.
Yeah.
So it's now the max width.
Yeah. We could also use margins, as Tomas said.
So you can use like margin 0 pixel auto.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then you would have to give it a width, like in order to center it.
Yeah. Because right now it doesn't have a width, so you can't use auto.
See, if I did margin 0 auto, nothing would happen because that trick only works once you give content a width. So if I said like, so you can see it says 734 pixels. So if I gave it a width, 734 pixels and display, what? Do you know why it's not working?
Try doing margin after setting the width. I don't know if that makes a difference.
I don't think so.
Right. Yes?
Doesn't work if there's an absolute element.
Oh, right. Yeah, our div is absolute right now, so we can't use margins. Yeah, sorry about that.
But you can use like left.
Yeah.
Left 50% and then calc half of it.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's kind of like the same thing with the top, and then you calc half of it for a negative. You can do that, but I mean this is probably cleaner.
Yeah. All right, that's it for our hands-on today.
Cool. We're gonna have 10 minutes of a break.
This is this on?
Flip it and then it'll be on.
This one? Oh, I think it's on.
Yeah, it's on.
Oh. Are you sure?
Yeah, I hear it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hi. Is Charlotte here, or Alexandra? Charlotte or Alexandra? Oh, wait. Can you come to the front real?
Okay, we're gonna get started. Last week we talked about typography and images. We kind of left off at images due to time constraints. We're gonna come back to some of the image background stuff later today. But today's lecture is on layouts. And before we talk about layouts, again, let's focus on some of the bad UIs. And today we have a student submission for a bad UI. I think some of you saw on Piazza. It was pretty cool. What's wrong with this UI? It's her official website.
It's ratchet.
So one person said it's ratchet. Any opinions or thoughts? Yeah.
What is it supposed to do? Like, I don't like unless you told me this was like her official website, I would not at all know from the layout what it was for exactly. Like, what am I supposed to do?
Yeah. Yeah. So the students that said that you wouldn't know what to do because, I mean, from an emphasis point of view, everything is diverse. Like there's the buy. I'm assuming the album, news events, like everything's all over the place. So it's really good. That's a good feedback from layout point of view. Any other comments? Yeah.
I mean, to be fair, it fits her brand pretty well. I mean, like, that's what she wants her website to do, right? Like, herself. That's the Miley Cyrus website. Like, it's pretty out there.
Yeah.
Lines with her, like,
Yeah. So.
her website to do what she wants to do.
So Z said that this website, it fits her brand. Yeah, from my knowledge of Miley Cyrus, yeah, it does fit her brand. Like she's more of like a eccentric, kind of like unique. She's going for that, and she's going for that. And given that background, given her brand as a musical artist, I think that this does fit her brand. But sometimes you have to decide between branding and user experience. You shouldn't sacrifice user experience solely for for branding. And I guess this would be an example of going all out on branding and neglecting the user experience. Any last comments about this user interface? Yeah.
Because there's so much stuff going on, you don't know what is an image and what's a link to something else.
Oh yeah. So the student said that there's so many things going on, and there's a mix between image and text, and you don't know what is a link. For example, if you see a Miley Cyrus, the huge title, is that clickable? I don't know. News event shop, probably clickable. Is the buy clickable? Maybe. You don't know if something's a button. You don't know if an item is an actionable item. So today's topic is on layouts. It's all about where should you place important elements. Not something like this where you just just throw everything all over the place. You have to know where you place important elements to get the most amount of emphasis. And after we talk about layouts, we're going to talk about a very trending design in the web design space, which is a single visual, one-page scrolling website. And before we talk about everything about layouts and technical part of it, I think it's best to start from some of the psychology behind how we scan web pages. So this is a graphic of from research they conducted research where they would track users' eye movements. And you see that the red is the area where the user's eyes go the most. And blue is where there isn't a lot of attention, where users' attention does not go to. And as you can see, the top left area of a web page gets the most amount of attention, whereas the bottom right gets the least amount of attention. So based on this information, a logical step would be to place the most important element on the top left. Can anyone guess why people browse web pages or any other like reading material like this? Yes, yes. So yeah, the student said that the way we read the way we read books and reading materials, we read from top left to bottom right. So I can't quite confirm this, but one question that I have is, what about for like Japanese like mangas? Like they read from top right to bottom left. So would that affect how the website structure should be on Japanese websites? Not too sure. So that's one question that I have. But based on
It actually does.
it actually does.
Yeah.
Super cool. Is that from research?
It is from research.
Cool. So apparently for Japanese websites, it's the other way around. You place the most important element on the top right because that's how they read their books. So because we read our books from top left to bottom right, it is important to place most important element on the top left. So based on that psychology, we have this thing called F-style layout. So again, the fundamental idea is that we scan web pages from top left to bottom right. And therefore, you should design your websites by putting the most important element on the top left, top right, and the middle left, middle right, bottom left, and bottom right. An example of this would be a Facebook top bar. As you can see, on Facebook, the logo is on the top left. The search is on the top left. So all the most important elements are on the top left. And an example of an F-style layout would be this. Again, for most websites, branding is very, very important. So they would usually place their logos on the top left. Facebook, Google, even for this like mock-up website, the F layout, the logo is on the top left. And then the other important elements would be navigation items, because you have to direct the users as to which other pages to go to, so that you have navigation on the top right. And then you have the headline, mission, the next important element. Below that, and then we have the content. And usually, the least important element would be the ads. So they would place the least important element, like the ads, on the bottom right. So 1, 2, 3, 4, in order of importance. So the company that utilizes F-style layout most effectively, most prominently all over their products would be Google. Google has a lot of different applications, but almost all of their apps, they utilize F-style layout. Let's look at one of them. This would be Gmail. For Gmail, they have, again, branding, the logo top left, the search bar on the top right, because, again, for Google, search is everything. So search should be really emphasized. And then they have navigation items on the left and the content on the right. Here's another example, Google Drive. As you can see, it's pretty much the same theme going on, F-style layout, logo, search, navigation, and content on the bottom right. YouTube, same thing. Logo on the top left, and then search bar, navigation, and content. So even though Google does a lot of different things, they bring cohesiveness and connection across all of their products using the theme of a F-style layout. Any other questions or thoughts about F-style layout? OK. So there are some exceptions to F-style rule. F-style really works well for applicational websites like Google Drive, Gmail, like apps. It works really well. But for promotional websites, like landing pages, it wouldn't work all the time. So an example would be Facebook Home. Facebook Home launched last year. It's basically a landing page for that app. And for a landing page, their emphasis is on promotion. So to do the promotion, instead of having the app, what they do is you kind of like evoke a person's emotion through imagery. So instead of placing the navigation on the top, they place the image on the top with a huge text. So users' attention would go to the image first and then the title, and then the actionable items rather than the navigation. So again, this style of layout, not the conventional website layout, would work the best for promotional websites. So when you're designing the website, you should design your website from on a top-down approach, especially when you're doing the IMDb. You shouldn't think about the specific content first. You should think about the general skeleton, frame of your website first, and then dive into your specific content. So this lecture, we're gonna be studying how you should approach designing your website from coding point of view. So you usually start by coding up the navigation, because navigation is the most important element, and it usually provides a good theme for your website's layout, as you guys saw on Google F-style layout, navigation, the sidebar, and stuff like that. And for Facebook, their theme is a huge blue top bar, so you guys should focus on getting the navigation down when you're doing the IMDb project. So there are two common methods when it comes to navigation. One is a top bar, like Facebook. Another is sidebar, like TweetDeck and Medium. Here's an example of a top bar. It's called Dribble. They have a top bar on the top. And it's usually top bars are used in conjunction with position fixed property that Andy mentioned, because navigations are something that users should have access to at all times, even if the user scrolls the web page. So to do that, you use CSS position fixed. Here's an example of a sidebar. Medium does not use top bar. Instead, they use sidebar. Can anyone guess why they opted for sidebar instead of a top bar? Anyone other than our TA? Can anyone guess? Yes.
If you scroll down and scroll on the left the whole time.
Wait, excuse me?
If you scroll down the page, the sidebar stays with you. The top bar seems to go all the way back up.
That's not how it actually works on Medium website. Let me actually show you how it behaves on the actual website. Maybe it does. Medium. So it's actually, when you actually turn on the sidebar, the page becomes unscrollable. Yeah?
The content itself has like a top bar?
The content? Are you talking about the reading list, top stories, and stuff like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point too. So if you already have a top bar, like a top bar kind of navigation, you might want to try a different navigation for the main navigation. That's a good point. Any other thoughts? Yeah.
In terms of reading the stories,
Mm-hmm.
when you're going to the blog, maybe it's a bit easier to have it on the left side rather than have it kind of move.
Yeah. So let's say I'm on an article page, and on an article page they do have a top bar there, but you can click on this to show the top sidebar. Yeah. Any other? Yeah.
Is it just because they want to emphasize the story content, so that's why it's on the side, so it's hidden, you're looking for stuff when you want it into it?
Yeah. So the student said that it's because you want to give more emphasis to the content and tuck away the navigation. And from their blog, according to their design blog, that is their thought process behind implementing a sidebar instead of the top bar. Because if you have they really want to focus on, for Medium, everything is on, their core emphasis is on the content. They want the users to concentrate on reading the content. And as you can see, the top bar goes away. But when I scroll up, the top bar appears. So usually the navigation is just entirely gone, and everything is content. So by having the sidebar layout, users have access only if and only if the user requests that I would like to access the sidebar. So that way, it gives a lot of emphasis to the content, not the other side of the application. Is there a hand? Yeah.
On long pages, when you have to do a lot of scrolling,
Scrolling.
a little bit less obtrusive. Also, it sort of reduces. If your page would otherwise be too wide, you can use that to reduce the width.
Yeah. So what was your first point, by the way? What was your first point?
If someone has a very long page in general and a lot of scrolling to do, it may be better to have a sidebar on the side.
Yeah. So he brought up 2 points. Number one is that if you are scrolling a lot, it might be better to place a sidebar, use a sidebar. And if you have for a lot very wide screen, it might be better to place a sidebar to better utilize the space, especially for laptops, because for laptops, most of your screens are landscape. So it might be better to utilize that wide screen rather than to take up a vertical space. Tomas?
One more thing, on mobile,
Mhm.
when it's top menu,
Mhm.
then it will occupy too much space
Mhm.
to read.
Yeah, that is very true. So Tomas said that on mobile, top bar might not be the best idea because it constantly takes up the space. So so you shouldn't go for the top bar. I think same thing applies. That's why for mobile, a lot of people opt to use a sidebar when you click on the hamburger icon to pull out the sidebar from the left. So that'll be navigation. For your IMDb project, you can do either one. You can do the top bar or sidebar, but make sure that you guys kind of support your argument behind why you chose this style of navigation. Now you have content frame. Now that you have a general layout of your website down, you have to think about the frame for your content. So as I mentioned in my typography and spacing lecture, people usually have a maximum width of 960 pixel container, and that usually creates a frame for the area that encapsulates your content. So an example of that would be Stripe. And on Stripe, notice that their content never range from the left edge to the right edge. It's encapsulated under a 960 pixel container. For them, they use a top bar, but below that, they have a content space, but this content space is encapsulated on a content frame. Before we move on to our next topic, we're going to do our lorem ipsum word of the day. Is it ready, Philip?
Yeah, in like 2 seconds.
Wait, what did you say?
In 2 seconds. Let me just.
OK, so Philip's going to come around with the lorem ipsum word of the day. And here's another website. Here's a website that I hacked before the Cal hacks. It's basically like a schedule website. And notice that, again, this is not left edge to right edge. There's a container surrounding the content. And I feel like this is something that you guys should take into account for your IMDb website, too, because you usually don't want your content to range from left edge to right edge, but instead encapsulate it in a container. After you worry about all the navigation and the skeleton frame down, then you can worry about the specific content for your website. And for this, there are many ways to there are many approaches that you can take, depending on what kind of website it is. For personal and promotional websites, people usually use slides layout. For applications, they use this thing called Cards UI. Here's an example of a slides style layout. It's called Mapbox. For these, I'm going to show you the actual website, mapbox.com. So this would be a promotional website. For promotional websites, again, you have to evoke the user's emotion. So they go for a very large scale imagery, and each section seems as if they're individual slides. Slide 1, slide 2, slide 3. Now slide 3 is sponsors. Slide 4, their value proposition, their other value proposition, and so on and so forth. So these type of slides UI is very prominent for promotional landing pages. And for application websites like Tumblr, people use a lot of Cards UI because you want to gravitate users' attention to individual posts. And to do that, you're going to have to encapsulate each content under its own frame. Each of the content will get its own frame, as in each of the posts on Tumblr gets its own white frame. Another style of UI that is very prominent these days is tile style UI. And this is usually used for administrative admin panels and dashboards, such as this dribble work right here. Any questions about navigation, content frame, or specific content? Yeah.
How about bottom bar, bottom menu?
The bottom bar, I think you mean bottom bar with position fixed, right?
Yes.
I think bottom bar with position fix would work really well if you want to make a promotional website, like a portfolio website, as to give a lot of emphasis to the imagery and the content more than the navigation. But you still want the navigation to be there even if you scroll. I know, because that's what you're going for in your website. Yeah. So now I'm going to talk about the methodology behind like how you like make the websites when you're designing the layouts. So you might want to learn all the CSS techniques about like using float, using position absolutes, and so on and so forth. So you'd be like, so how do I actually make these websites? If you think about it like on a on a macro level, it's not that hard. So there are three. Divide your website when you're making the elements into three cases. Case one is you have elements stacked horizontally. If it's horizontally stacked, you use floats. If your elements are stacked vertically, you don't have to do anything because divs do it automatically. And if you want to place an element on top of each other, you use position absolute. So divide each of your elements into three cases. If it's horizontally stacked, floats. Vertically stacked, you don't have to do anything. If it's on top of each other, you use position absolute.
Wait, when you say on top, you mean layers?
Layers, yep. Okay. Let's say you have text on top of an image that'll be on top of each other. Okay. So we're going to go through a quick exercise as to designing a website based on this methodology. Let's say you have this website. Which item should you design first? Imagine all of a sudden you're in an interview, and the interviewer asks you to design this website in 3 hours. Which item should you design first? Navigation bar. It's on the very top, and it is the most important element on your website. So you'd approach by designing the navigation bar first. So the navigation bar, it's not that hard. So every navigation bar is just a bar with 5 elements stacked horizontally. So you would use floats. That's it. So you have a logo, float left, navigation, float left, search is on the right, so you use float right, and you're done. What about the cover page? For the yeah.
I just had a quick question on the nav.
Sure.
What would you recommend using a nav tag or the nav the HTML nav tag? Or would you use it just
Div?
Or the list kind of thing?
Preferably, you should use nav tag. So the question was, should you use a nav tag or should you use a div plus order list? You should use order list even for this because lists is the proper name for the list items. But there's no difference between navigation tag, nav tag, and div tag in terms of its effect on the document. I think Andy will go over that in detail next week regarding HTML5 semantic tags. But usually you use navigation nav tag just for your own sake and for other developers' sake so that it's more recognizable on the code. For the cover, as you can see, the text, the content is on top of an image. So you use position absolute. So the implementation would be you have the cover image, position absolute, and you'd have the content, position absolute, just with a higher z index to put it on top of the image. And for the content, within the contents, things are stacked vertically, so you don't have to do anything. Any questions about the cover? So now we have the content. Things look a little bit complicated, but it's not that hard if you break each element down component by component. So this content area is divided into 3 parts. You have the sidebar, you have the gallery, and you have the toolbar, and they are stacked horizontally. So you use floats. So you use float left to stack each of these 3 items horizontally. And within these items, you have different cases. For the sidebar, you have thumbnail, name, date, and contribution, which are all stacked vertically. So if things are stacked vertically, you don't have to do anything. You just use divs, and you don't have to worry about anything. And for the gallery area, again, each of the gallery items are stacked horizontally, so you use floats. And within each of the gallery items, things are stacked vertically, so you don't have to do anything. It's a div. And for the toolbox, again, things are stacked vertically, so you don't have to do anything. So, and then on the bottom, we have this music player. This would be kind of hard to do, but to just really gloss over the details, you have the shuffle, play, pause button, those 3 buttons, and the whole progress bar and the options. They're all stacked horizontally. So you just stack everything horizontally using floats. And for the progress bar, the little dot on top, the dot is on top of a bar. So you place the bar as position absolute and the dot as position absolute, and just stack them on top of each other using position absolutes. So before I end this section about this whole divide and conquer methodology, website design is not that hard. Break it down into 3 cases: horizontal stacks, floats, vertical stacks. Don't need to do anything. And on top of each other, the layers would be position absolutes. So when you're designing the IMDb layout, sketch it out first and divide each of your elements into one of those 3 cases and implement and use the right positioning method based on those cases. Any questions about divide and conquer? Cool. So for last meeting section, we're going to talk a little bit about different kinds of website design, that is promotional website. Promotional websites, again, for them, we really have to evoke a user's emotion, not just provide user experience. So that's why a lot of people use single visual design, which is basically a one-page scroll website with a huge emphasis on the imagery and text. So here's an example. It's called The Fernway. Let me show you the actual website. TheFernway.com. For them, they actually used a video background. As you can see the water, you can see the waves. It's all HTML5 video. So the video is pretty much playing on the background. And as you can see, this website, it goes all out on the emotion, the desire for distance, the longing for experience, the need to escape. Combine the image with these text, it really provokes the user's emotion as to discover more about this application. Then you go down to Welcome to the Fernway. Again, a huge emphasis on typography. And it ends with a call for action by taking the user's email. Okay. So this style of UI is very prominent for promotional websites. Blue Homes does the same thing, image with text. And because we're going over a lot of these mixing text with images, I would like to touch upon the stuff that we didn't get to talk last week, which is contrast and mixing text with images. So because, again, we're running out of time again, let me go through some. So when it comes to backgrounds, there are 2 ways you can accomplish background images. One is to have a div with width 100%, height 100%, position absolute, and image tucked inside. So obviously, you want to place your content on top of an image. So that's why we are using position absolutes. And another one is to, instead of using an image tag, you can just use CSS background image to link the image to your CSS. A use case would be, then you run into an issue of contrast. Sometimes when you have a very bright image and you have a very light text, image obscures the content of your website, and the text becomes very hard to read. One way to fix this is to make the image itself darker by going to Photoshop and decrease the brightness a little bit, or adding a blur. Blurring it brings more emphasis to the content too. Or you can add a text shadow property. To give an example, here's the website. For this website, it works really nicely because the text is light and the background is dark. So there's enough contrast between the two elements. For this website, the background is light, the text is light, but there is enough contrast because around the text, the designer applied a text shadow property to separate the text from the image. Another solution, which I'm going to demonstrate in a bit, is to add a semi-transparent overlay on top of an image using HTML and CSS. And let me show you how you do that. Chrome. So now we have an image, and we have text. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put the text on top of an image. I have a background tag. I'm going to zoom in. Width 100%, height 100%. And for the background, inside the image tag should get the same thing. Background image, width 100%, height 100%. Now we have a background. Now the text goes on top of an image. So the text would get a position absolute. And it's going to get top 0 pixels. And now as you can see, the text is on top of an image. I'm going to do a little bit of styling. Title should get font size 36. Margin bottom 12 pixel. As you can see, I'm using the scale of 12 here. Subtitle should get a font size of 18. And it works pretty nicely. Now I'm going to calculate the height of it. The height is 78 pixels. So by using the calc method, top 50% minus 78 divided by 2, that would be 9, so 29 pixels. And left would be 60 pixels. I'm going to make it color white. So how does it look now? The text is on top of an image, but there isn't enough contrast. Well, you could say that the image in general is pretty much light. So you could say do a dark color for the text. You could try that. But as you can see, for a lot of images, images have a combination of light and dark elements. So even making the text black did not really help the issue. So to solve this problem, I'm going to change this back to white. And I'm going to use this thing called overlays. So I have a div called background overlay. And I'm going to make it position absolute. I'm using position absolute because I want to place this element on top of an image. So width 100%, height 100%. I'm going to make it a background of black. Ooh. Top 0 pixels. And it covered up the entire image. Now I'm going to change around the opacity. And now we have, that's not what I want. Drag around the slider, and you have, you have this. Now there's enough contrast between the text and the image. And this is one way you can decrease the brightness of your image by having an overlay on top of an image, make it a black of an opacity 0.6, and that brings a lot of contrast to the content. Any questions about contrast through overlays? Yeah.
How would you go about making like the iOS 8 like glossy, like translucent effect?
You mean the blur?
Yeah, like
the blur. So the blur. It's really so the blur. There are many ways to do it. There's this thing called CSS filter. So I could do WebKit filter blur 20 pixels. It makes it blurry. You could do this, but I don't recommend using this for 2 reasons. Number one is that blur is not supported on all browsers. It has a very limited browser support. And number 2 is that the performance is not that great when it comes to all browsers. And it also reduces the quality of an image. I mean, what you can even do is you can decrease the brightness of it. I'm not sure if it's brightness or like contrast. Was it contrast? Contrast 10? Yeah, you can do like, as you can see, the contrast has changed. But what using WebKit filter actually degrades the quality of an image. So it's not preferred to use WebKit filter. Any other questions regarding blurs and backgrounds and overlays? Yeah.
Is it something like the RGBA?
Yeah. I am using RGBA on the background. RGBA 0.000.6. Yep. Any other questions? Cool. So now we are done with our lecture part. So now we're gonna get to our hands-on section, which is gonna be on layouts and sidebars. Uploaded? Is it uploaded? Let me just set up everything for you. Oh. Yeah, if you haven't already, you should download the files for the hands-on week 5. We're going to manipulate the index.html. Cool.
So I think Sean just showed what Medium looks like. So we're going to make a blog post web page thing that kind of looks like Medium. So right now it looks really, really ugly. You don't even know what that is. It's a cat, but it's just really big. So okay, so let's start by making sure the cat's actually on the website in frame. So how would we make sure the image just fits what we see but not, and resize it so it's across the entire page? Yes. Yes.
So we select the image and then we apply a width of 100%.
Yay. So now we can see the cat. It is very cute. So if you see on the top left corner, there's this hello world text on the very corner. It's kind of cut off on the projector, but there's hello world, and underneath it says the adventures of a cat. So that's going to be our title and subtitle. Instead of having it super close and squished to the corner, we're going to overlay it on text. So we just did this. So do you guys remember what kind of positioning do we need to apply to make sure the text is on top of the image? What kind of position? Okay. And then, so to shift it down, we can use margin. We learned this before. So now it's, you see hello world is now on the middle, in the middle. So to shift it left, we can do margin left. And since it's a title, we're going to make it bigger. So that's will be font size. Yeah. And since the cat's black, we can make the text white so you can see it. Yay. And you can do the same thing with the subtitle. Except this time you won't necessarily make it as big as the title, so the title will stand up.
What font size should I use?
Did you use 50?
Yeah.
So 20. 20 is fine. Oh.
Oh, I forgot to put position.
So remember, if you don't put position, it'll just try to make the margin like right where it's located, versus if you do position absolute, it's going to be overlaid on the text. I mean, the photo.
I'm not really sure if this is working. That's fine. Yeah, so we just basically shifted a little bit lower than the actual header, so it goes under it. And yeah, that's all I want to say.
Okay, now if you guys see on the top, there's kind of this top bar thing, but we already made a top bar earlier, so let's make a sidebar. So to make a sidebar, go to the navbar class, and we're going to, how do you think we can make it apply to the very left side of the page? like across, like down the left side of the page. Any guesses? Yes.
I'm thinking height 100%, float left, keep split,
Okay.
and fix it. Like
Position fixed. Okay.
Yeah, so we're going to need to use position fix because we're going to want to have this sidebar always stay on the side. I'm not I don't think float left will work, but we can try.
Yeah.
So it turns out it works. Good job.
And if you see, the text is now going across the sidebar, but we want it to go down. So to do that, we can change the display. So if you go to the navbar item, which is the text, and you apply display block, and it'll go down instead of going across.
Yeah, we need to just apply a width to the sidebar so that it doesn't look so small. So about 200 pixels looks good.
And you can also give it more padding if you want to stylize it more. So let's move on to the actual blog or the body text. So if you go to the bottom, you can drag it up. If you go to the bottom, you can see that it's all like, the text is across the page and it's really hard to read. So to first make it easier to read, what should we apply to the text? Space? What kind of space? Yes.
Okay. So we're actually going to apply it to this thing called blog lorem because we sort of divided our text into paragraphs like that. So that way we're going to apply line height and space them out from each other using margins.
Okay, now since the text is still stretched across the entire page, how can we make it so there's some spacing on both sides so the text is centered on the page? Someone want to guess? Margin? What kind of margin? Do you want to try that?
Sorry, what was?
Margin left.
Here.
Where should we apply margin left?
you want to apply margin on the I guess the parent or whatever your paragraphs are.
Okay, so that's blog text, yeah.
We're just trying to constrain the text itself.
Yeah, it's like margin.
So maybe like setting a width on it and then applying margin 0 auto to center it. Like for now, we want to have the sidebar over the. For now, we want to have the sidebar over the text. Just for now, we'll try fixing that later. So we just do width 720 pixels and then margin 0 auto to have this kind of an effect. Actually, we're gonna apply margin 40 pixels auto just so we can space out the paragraph from the top, from the bottom of the picture. So 40 pixels auto, and that way we have some white space, so it looks better. Yeah.
Yes.
So why did you want to specify the div tag width rather than specifying the content within the div tag, like using margin kind of thing? So why would you want to have the div be specified a certain width rather than the content inside the div tag being?
Okay. Well, it's just like if you have a container over all your divs, it would just be easier to apply one property to the container. And that way, when you set 100% on the children, they'll automatically take the width of the parent. So it's just easier than setting width to each and every element. Yeah, that's the point of containers. Okay, next is. Sorry? Okay. So I'm just going to show you guys a cool trick. So right now, you notice that the sidebar is actually over the whole page. And maybe you want to go for something like the sidebar being besides the page. So how do you guys think we can actually achieve that? Just applying one simple line of code to some element on the page. Any ideas? Okay. Well, we know that we have everything in our page under a container, right? So everything's inside that container, and all we can do is just apply margin left. Oh shit. Whoops. Yeah. Just the margin left of whatever the width of the container is. Oh, sorry, the sidebar. So we notice that the nav bar has a size of 230 pixels. If you look at the top left corner, not sure if you can see it. So we just apply a margin left of 230 pixels, and we have our sidebar and page side by side right now. And you can scroll, and the sidebar will stay in place, and that's because we applied position fixed to the sidebar.
Do you guys have any questions so far? Yes.
So like when you like link to different pages, how do you make sure that it stays?
So if you have the same sidebar on each page, like you have the same HTML block of the sidebar on each page, that way it'll seem as if it's not really changing and the sidebar is always there, but it's actually just different. The same sidebar just repeated over the different pages. Not sure if that.
Each page you have to like.
So you have the same HTML and yeah.
So if you like wanted to change your menu, you have to change it for every single page.
Kind of. I mean, there are obviously ways where you could like extract that away and put that in a different file and then like load a base sidebar, but we're not really going to teach that. And I don't really know how to do that personally. But I'm sure there's a way to do that. And yeah, you're right. It does make it hard to change the sidebar. Yes.
Oh yeah, so the user involves the backend because then you need something to insert raw HTML into other HTML pages. So for the purposes of this course where you're just learning raw HTML, you won't be able to do it. But for other cases, you should be able to. And you could probably do it with like JavaScript, Django, or anything like that.
I saw a hand in the back somewhere. I think it went. Yeah.
So push the container, the whole container to the right. Does that have to be position absolute?
No, because I use the margin. If you. Yeah, so I use the margin left, so that you don't need to have a different position on that for that to work. Because the nav bar is position fixed. So remember how it's like kind of apart from the page. It's like a separate element. It doesn't really depend on the other elements. So it's as if it's not even there. So basically, if I remove the nav bar, if I just say display none or something, just white space. Yeah. Right. I think we're done.
Okay, Sean. You have a question?
You want to float the container div, and if you do position none for the navigation, then everything would shift, right?
So you're saying if I were to apply float left to the container?
Yeah.
Let's try. So should I get rid of this? Well, actually, I won't really make. I mean, if you apply float, and then what did you say you want me to do after that? What else were you trying to test?
Oh, shouldn't the div float to the right of the...
This too? The navbar? Yeah. No, because again, it's the same kind of idea that the navbar is like a separate element because it's position fixed right now. So yeah, they don't really depend on each other anymore because we broke that relationship apart. All right. Yeah, Sean. Yeah. Yeah. All right, thank you.
As always, the homework will be announced, will be released sometime tomorrow. That'll be the last homework before the group project. So next week there won't be homework, but there'll be just a group project due on October 21st. The group project feedback, the check-in session is this weekend. It is mandatory. So and we're gonna release the group project check-in forms along with the homework. So please sign up for one of the forms so that you guys get credit for the check-ins, okay? All right, thank you.